Dad would go out on the track. It was, I'm going to wreck Geoff Bodine as fast and as quickly as I
In
possibly.
NASCAR, some rivalries are born from respect, and others are just about hard racing. But every once in a while, you get a feud that comes from something deeper, something that feels like pure, uncut animosity. These are the conflicts that define an era, drawing lines in the sand not just between two drivers, but between entire fan bases. They become the stuff of legend. Even among those legends, the war between Dale Earnhardt and Geoff Bodine was different. It was so intense, so personal, and so hostile that it forced NASCAR to step in and lay down the law. As Dale Earnhardt Jr. later put it, this rivalry was Mount Rushmore material, defined by what he called a true hatred across both sides. This wasn't just trading paint for a win. For Dale Earnhardt, his battle with Geoff Bodine became a personal crusade. He never had to stand in front of a microphone and call the man a fraud. He didn't need to. His actions on the track, lap after brutal lap, screamed it for him. In Earnhardt's world, there was a code, a way you raced and a way you carried. Yourself. He saw Geoff Bodine as an outsider who not only broke that code, but raced in a way Earnhardt considered reckless, illegitimate, and fundamentally wrong. This is the story of that feud. This is the evidence, presented one race at a time, that Dale Earnhardt used to build his case against Geoff Bodine in the only court that mattered to him, the court of asphalt and steel. While Dale Earnhardt never said the word fraud, his actions on the track did all the talking. He was convinced Geoff Bodine's racing style was a sham, and from the flashpoint of the Winston to the calculated payback that followed, he used NASCAR's biggest stages as his proof. This is the breakdown of that evidence, a story that wasn't just about winning, but about domination, validation, and one man's cold, hard verdict on another. To get why the Earnhardt-Bodine rivalry exploded, you first have to understand the two men at its center. They were polar opposites, forged in different fires, representing two conflicting cultures inside the transformative NASCAR of the 1980s. Their eventual collision wasn't just likely, it was inevitable. First, you had Dale Earnhardt. By the mid-80s, he was more than a driver. He was an icon, the embodiment of Southern blue-collar grit. The son of dirt track legend Ralph Earnhardt, Dale learned racing by reading the dents on his father's car, not from engineering textbooks. He was from Kannapolis, North Carolina, the heart of stock car country, and he drove with a raw, primal instinct. His style was aggressive, unforgiving, and completely unapologetic. He was first Ironhead and later the Intimidator. For Earnhardt, racing wasn't a gentleman's sport, it was a brawl for every inch of pavement. Respect was earned through toughness and with the front bumper. When he climbed into that black number 3 Chevy, he wasn't just driving a race car, he was upholding a sacred code. His fans didn't just cheer for him, they saw themselves in him. Then, you had Geoff Bodine. If Earnhardt was the untamed spirit of the South, Bodine was the polished, calculating invader from the North. Hailing from Chemung, New York, Bodine's path to NASCAR was totally different. He came from the modified ranks of the Northeast, a world known for technical innovation and a precise, methodical driving style. He wasn't an outlaw, he was an engineer with a steering wheel, famous for his incredible car control. When Bodine came south, he came to win, and he did it with the team of the future, Hendrick Motorsports. Founded by the visionary Rick Hendrick, this wasn't some good old boys club. It was a powerhouse built on meticulous prep, cutting-edge tech, and a corporate structure that was brand new to the sport. As the team's first driver, Bodine was the face of this new wave. He was clean-cut, well-spoken, and wildly talented. In 1986, he won the Daytona 500, proving he was a legitimate superstar. But to the old guard, and especially to a purist like Earnhardt, Bodine represented something alien, the Yankee who hadn't paid his dues on Carolina dirt tracks. His success, With the well-funded, almost clinical Hendrick operation was viewed with suspicion. Was it the driver, or was it the car? Was his precise style masterful control, or a lack of the grit needed to truly go to war? These questions were hanging in the air long before the feud ignited. At first, there was something like a friendship. Both men started in the Cup Series in 1979, and Bodine later recalled how their families would hang out, with his kids playing with Dale Jr. and Kelly at Earnhardt's lake house. But as their stars rose, the on-track competition started chipping, away at any goodwill. A bump here, a close call there. Earnhardt, always judging his competitors, began to form an opinion. He saw Bodine's driving as erratic, maybe even in over his head. Bodine, for his part, refused to be pushed around. He gave as good as he got, calling Earnhardt the Eliminator for his tendency to use the bumper to clear his path. He respected Earnhardt's talent but refused to be intimidated, a stance that was a direct challenge to the Intimidator's authority. The culture clash was real. Earnhardt's fans saw Bodine as a prima donna who whined when things got tough. Bodine's supporters saw Earnhardt as a dangerous bully. The media, of course, fanned the flames. It was the old guard versus the new school, South versus North, instinct versus intellect. By the time the 1987 season rolled around, the stage was set. All it needed was a spark. That spark came on a hot May night in Charlotte, at a race called the Winston. It would be Dale Earnhardt's opening argument in his public trial of Geoff Bodine. The Winston, now the all-star race, was built for drama. A non-points, winner-take-all shootout designed to make drivers throw caution to the wind for a huge pile of cash. The 1987 race, with its 10-lap dash for the finish, was engineered for chaos. And with a field full of legends like Bill Elliott, Darrell Waltrip, and Richard Petty, it was a powder keg waiting for a match. That match was lit on lap 1. As the field roared into the corner, it happened. Dale Earnhardt and Geoff Bodine, drawn together like magnets, made contact. Bodine's car got loose, sliding up and nudging Earnhardt's Chevy. Both cars wobbled, fighting for grip just inches from the wall. They both saved it, but a message was sent. To the fans, it was a thrilling moment. To Dale Earnhardt, it was Exhibit A. In his mind, this was the exact pattern he'd been seeing, Bodine driving over his head, creating a dangerous situation. While Bill Elliott pulled away to win the first 2 segments, Earnhardt was stewing, filing the incident away as evidence. The final segment, just 10 laps for $200,000. On the restart, Bodine got a huge jump on pole-sitter Bill Elliott. As they charged into turn 1, Elliott drifted high, hitting Bodine and sending him spinning out of contention. In the chaos, a lane opened up on the bottom, and who shot through the gap? Dale Earnhardt. With pure predator's instinct, he snatched the lead. Now, it was just Earnhardt and Elliott, head-to-head for the money. But for Earnhardt, this was about more than a paycheck. This was about proving a point. Elliott, who probably had the faster car, was all over Dale's bumper. But Earnhardt drove the widest Chevrolet on the track, protecting his lead at all costs. Then came the moment that became NASCAR lore. Coming into the tri-oval, Elliott got a massive run and pulled alongside. It looked like the pass for the win. But Earnhardt refused to yield. They made contact, and for a heart-stopping second, the black number 3 veered off the asphalt and onto the infield grass at nearly 200 miles per hour. Normally, that's the end of your day. You spin, you crash, you lose. But this was Dale Earnhardt. In a supernatural display of car control, he kept his foot in it, fishtailing through the turf and somehow wrestling the car back onto the track without losing the lead. The crowd went insane. It was immediately nicknamed the Pass in the Grass, even though it wasn't a pass. For Earnhardt, it was a statement. You can't move me, you can't wreck me, you can't intimidate me. It was the ultimate act of defiance. The battle wasn't over. A furious Elliott mounted another charge, pulling alongside again. They traded paint until the abuse was too much for Elliott's tire, which finally gave way. Earnhardt cruised to victory, but the race didn't end there. On the cool-down lap, Elliott intentionally rammed Earnhardt's car. Back on pit road, crews were shoving each other, and Elliott fumed, "If a man has to put you out to beat you, that is not what I call racing." But think about who started it all. The night began with contact from Bodine. In Earnhardt's eyes, Bodine's recklessness kicked off the entire chain of events. The world was focused on the Earnhardt-Elliott duel, but for Dale, the problem was Bodine. He'd won the race and the money, but more importantly, he had presented his evidence. The Winston was over, but the war had just begun. The fallout from the Winston was immediate. NASCAR, trying to regain control, fined Earnhardt and Elliott, but in a move that spoke volumes, they also penalized Geoff Bodine, hitting him with a fine and probation. For Earnhardt, the message was clear. Even NASCAR saw Bodine as part of the problem. If the Winston was the indictment, the next few months would be the sentencing. This was no longer about incidents. It was a campaign. The first shot was fired just 6 days later at a Busch Grand National race in Charlotte. This time, Bodine got his payback, tagging Earnhardt and sending him spinning. It was a clear message: I won't be pushed around. NASCAR's response was swift, slamming Bodine with a massive $15,000 fine and extended probation. Though the penalty was later reduced, on appeal, the battle lines were drawn. This was now a blood feud. The war carried into the 1988 season. Dale Earnhardt Jr., who saw it all unfold, said his father transformed. "I mean, Dad would lose his mind," he recalled. He'd go out on the track and no longer was he thinking about winning the race. It was, "I'm going to wreck Geoff Bodine as fast and as quickly as I possibly can." This wasn't racing. It was an obsession. Earnhardt would throw away a good finish just to exact his brand of justice. This is where his fraud thesis was written, in twisted sheet metal. By wrecking Bodine for positions that didn't even matter, Earnhardt was publicly showing his utter contempt. One of the most theatrical moments came at another Busch race in Charlotte in 1988. Earnhardt spun Bodine. Again. A furious Bodine climbed. From his car, marched toward the track under caution, and drew a giant X in the air, pointing right at Earnhardt. It was a gunslinger's challenge understood by everyone watching. The very next day in the Coca-Cola 600, Earnhardt responded. As Bodine was passing him, Dale just turned his car and wrecked him. No subtlety, no racing deal. It was a deliberate, calculated act. This time, NASCAR had to act decisively. They hit Earnhardt with a crippling 5-lap penalty, ending his day. The situation was so out of control that it led to the creation of a penalty box on pit road, a punishment largely inspired by Earnhardt's actions. The feud had become a crisis. It was dividing fans and creating a toxic atmosphere. Bill, France Jr., the head of NASCAR, had seen enough. In a moment that would become legendary and later immortalized in Days of Thunder, he summoned both drivers and their owners, Richard Childress and Rick Hendrick, to a meeting. This wasn't a negotiation. It was a lecture. According to Hendrick, France laid down the law. "Y'all are going to sit down and not say a word. I'm going to tell you how this is going to go. You're going to race in my series. You're going to do what I tell you to do in terms of straightening up. You're not bigger than the sport." When Earnhardt reportedly said he had other dinner plans, France pointed to the phone and said, "Cancel them." The meeting was a watershed moment. The open warfare had to stop. But in Earnhardt's mind, he'd already won. He had pushed Bodine to the brink, wrecked him repeatedly, and forced the highest power in the sport to intervene. He had treated Bodine not as a competitor, but as an obstacle to be removed, delivering his final verdict for the world to see. The Earnhardt-Bodine feud was so raw and cinematic, it was destined to spill into pop culture. It became a major inspiration for the rivalry between Cole Trickle and Rowdy Burns in the 1990 blockbuster Days of Thunder. That legendary meeting with Bill France Jr. recreated almost word for word in the film. Geoff Bodine himself confirmed it, saying, "The feud between the drivers, the one that got so bad they had to be brought in front of NASCAR, that was me and Dale Earnhardt." For both men, the rivalry was a defining part of their careers. For Earnhardt, it cemented his intimidator persona. These battles proved he was willing to go further than anyone to enforce his will. His fans loved him for it. It was proof he was the real deal. His team, from owner Richard Childress to his crew, had his back. As Dale Jr. noted, even when his dad was throwing a race away just to wreck Bodine, the team stood behind him. For Geoff Bodine, he was cast as the perpetual foil to NASCAR's biggest star. He was a Daytona 500 champion, but his legacy is forever tied to Earnhardt. He was the hard-headed Yankee who stood his ground. He always maintained their battles were just on-track stuff. But in his book, Bodine revealed a line that cut deep. He wrote that he only found out after Dale's tragic death that Earnhardt actually hated me. Dale Earnhardt Jr. has questioned this, suggesting hate might be too strong a word, especially years later. But the fact that this perception even exists shows how bitter the feud truly was. This wasn't manufactured drama. As Dale Jr. put it, the Earnhardts didn't like the Bodines, and the Bodines probably didn't love the Earnhardts. Interestingly, the feud didn't extend to the whole family. Dale Sr. had a surprising friendship with Geoff's younger brother, Todd Bodine. Todd recalled Dale riding horses from his farm over to his, and they shared a mutual respect that was a world away from the war Dale was waging with his older brother. It reveals the complexity of Earnhardt, a man who could harbor intense professional animosity toward one person while building a genuine friendship with his brother. Ultimately, the legacy of this rivalry is one of transformation. It pushed the limits of what was acceptable on the track and forced NASCAR to reassert its authority. It set a new bar for intensity in modern rivalries and gave the sport one of its most compelling stories, a clash of personalities, regions, and racing philosophies that captured a pivotal moment in NASCAR history. So, was Geoff Bodine a fraud? Dale Earnhardt never used the word. But from the first lap of the Winston in 1987 to the final wreck that brought the wrath of NASCAR down on him, his actions built an undeniable case. He presented his proof on the high banks of Charlotte and Daytona. He saw a driving style he deemed illegitimate, and he appointed himself judge, jury, and executioner. This was more than a rivalry. It was a crusade to enforce the Earnhardt Code. He used his bumper like a gavel, and the verdict echoed through the entire sport. We can debate his tactics, but the evidence of what he believed is written in every dented fender and every penalty he was willing to take. The story of Earnhardt and Bodine is a testament to an era when rivalries were personal, and a driver's actions spoke far more brutally than words ever could. What do you think? Was Earnhardt enforcing racing's unwritten rules, or was he a bully who went too far? Let us know your verdict in the comments. And if you enjoyed this deep dive, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the notification bell so you don't miss our next story. Thanks for watching.